Hello everyone! Today, we are going to be in Replit and Python making a MadLib game. In doing this, we will hopefully learn about input groups and string manipulation. Let's get started! As you can see, I've already laid out a basic framework for our program. I encourage you all to either look in the description where you can find a copy-paste version of this starter code, or just pause it sometime around here and copy down onto your own replit all of this code, because we're going to be filling it out and making the program from here. Let's start this with a brief reminder about what input group is. In case anyone doesn't remember, input group is a way for PyWeb.io to ask the user for multiple different inputs at once, as opposed to having only one input, let's say box for a string, and then having to press enter every single time. In order to do this, we'll actually delete this real quick. You need to format your input group like this. First, we will have a variable, we'll call it data, but it can really be anything, that is going to store all of the inputs from our user. Then we type in the keyword input group, and then in this parentheses, type in the title of our input group. We will just tell the user to enter the following words. And then usually what we do here is we have a list dictated by the opening and closing brackets of a bunch of inputs. And we could do it right inside this input group, put in all the inputs that we want, but just because we're having a MadLib, meaning we're going to have quite a few different inputs, we are actually going to be making the list outside of this input group and using it inside here. The way to do that is we are going to be making another variable up here. We'll call it input list, but it can be really anything. And then set it equal to opening and closing brackets. This means that it's currently equal to an empty list. And here we can put in input list. What this means is that if we put our different inputs inside here, then whenever we do input group, it will look at the input list and then use that as a basis to figure out what inputs it's going to use. So for this program, let's use this string up here as our basic adlib. And I encourage you all to add on more to it later, but for now, 4 questions to ask the user is fine to start off with. So in this example, we're going to need to ask the user for a person, like their name, a food, an adjective, and then finally an animal. In order to do this, we are going to, inside of our input list, start adding inputs. Let's just add an enter right there so it's a little easier to read. Just a reminder, in order to make an input that works inside the input group, we need to do it like this. Just like normal, you put an input, and then you put the title of the input. This will be person, will be first. Then you do a comma, and now you have to actually say what the name of the input is. For simplicity, we will name that person. This name right here is very important to remember, because this is how we're going to actually access whatever data the user entered in, so keep this in mind. Then finally, because this is a MadLib and we need the user to put in every single of these input fields, we are going to be doing required equals true. So at this point, we have one input. If we run this, we can see that it should end up working. Now that it's finally loaded, you can see that it outputs exactly what we assumed it would. Something worth noting is that even though that we put input person right here, this part where it actually asks the user for information does not actually happen until we get to this part right here. Because we put the input inside of a list, it doesn't run unless if we put it inside of an input group. This becomes important in a second, you'll see, as we're going to add the rest of our inputs. By using this model above and modeling it off of this input, let's see if we can't get the other 3 requests for words from our user. So as you can see, we've put in all of these inputs. It's worth noting that you don't need to add a comma at the very end of the list. These are only used to separate these. And it's also worth noting that even though I had the name very close to what we actually ask the user for, they do not need to be the same thing. In fact, often they shouldn't be the same thing. For instance, if I was trying to figure out what someone's age was, I might put something like, "What is your age?" And then as the identifier, the name of this input. Remember, this is what we're going to be using with our data in order to figure out actually what the user entered. We would just put something like age, or even something like person age. But for now, we're just going to keep it simple like this. By running this code, and I encourage you to do so too if you're trying to follow along, you'll get this output. As you can see, all 4 of these words are right here on the screen at the exact same time. In addition, if we try pressing submit, then it'll tell us that we actually cannot submit until we've put in each of these fields. Right now, it actually doesn't do anything, so if I do taco, red, dog, we haven't yet formatted our print statement yet, but we'll actually do that right now. Now, at the bottom of our code, we are going to be using the putText function. If you remember, what this does is it just puts the text on the screen, allowing the user to actually see what we wrote. Now, what we could do is we can just copy and paste this whole thing on here and then format these individual words by accessing our data. However, again, for organizational purposes, we are going to be making the string outside of the putText. So let's make a string, final string, and we'll set it equal to nothing right now, just an empty string. And then we are going to putText, final string. So what this does is it just prints out the file string to this website right here. And so whatever we change this final string to equal to, that's what's going to be put out. Now, what I encourage you all to do is you can actually copy this thing up here with Control-C, and then inside the string, paste it. Now, this won't actually use the data right here that the user has entered, but we're going to see if we can't fix that now. What we need to do is we need to add strings together. What we're going to do to do this is, well, we'll start off with this person. If we add 2 quotation marks, one before and one after person, add this new string in the middle, and then instead of person, we go to our data that we collected from the user, and then inside, put in the name that we put in for person earlier. Make sure that it's a lowercase because capital and lowercase do matter. If we do this, then it will take the data that we've entered for person and add it right here. Just as a quick example, we'll make sure that it works, and then we'll do the rest. Let's say Michael, food, red, animal. You see how it put the Michael that I entered there? That's exactly what we want. Now let's do it for the rest. Now, since it looks like we formatted our string, although it definitely doesn't look pretty right now, in our output it should work totally. Let's see if it works. if we put in my name for Michael, food, tacos, adjective, crazy, and animal, we'll do kangaroos. We see what outputs the correct thing. My friend Michael and I went to my favorite taco stand called the Crazy Kangaroo. Now, as you can see, we've at this point finished our basic MadLib program. I encourage you to change this, maybe making a bit more of a longer adlib. If you want to add input fields, you have the tools to do so, and I encourage you all to see if you can expand this before our class. In any case though, I hope you've learned something about input groups and string manipulation and Python during this coding session. You'll be able to find this final code in the description of this video if you'd like to just take a look at what I did, if you need to bug fix or something like that. But in the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I wish you all luck in your coding later.